We're going to get very practical in a few different slides, where I'll talk about what's worked for me, and as we've talked with others, what's worked to pick the themes. For me, that's not about theme-based church. That's about making sure you pick the right kinds of themes. Because if they're broad enough and rich enough, and if they're connected with our UU tradition, I've never had a case where number one, I couldn't make it fit, but more importantly, where it didn't shine a new light on whatever was happening. You know what I mean? Think of the themes that I've just named. I mean, if we played a little game here, you know, pick whatever event in the world would pop up. If the theme's big enough, it can bring a lens to it, and maybe an important lens that wouldn't be there otherwise. When we started tracking our new members and the stickiness of new members that got involved, we all know the rule that if you can get your newcomers involved not just in worship, but in a small group, within 2 to 3 months, the stickiness, the retention skyrockets, right? And yet we all struggle. What we saw by doing nothing differently, but just announcing more often, our small groups are a place to go into the worship more deeply. We went from 20% up to 65% of newcomers. Our small group program, I do a whole nother workshop on simple church, but we basically killed most of our other programming, and we had our Soul Matters group and 3 or 4 other small groups, and that was it. So those were the only options, but participation. So we had, out of a 1,000-member church, we had about 450 of those in Soul Matters groups. And over that time, because of this newcomers coming in, it jumped up, sometimes as high as up to 600. And that was totally, I gotta argue that's because people were like, I love this worship, and people wanted to go deeper, and they didn't. It always clunked when we did a sermon discussion group. Nobody came to, if you want to talk about the sermon more, or the sermon again, nobody came to those. Your sermons probably were so riveting that was different. But mine, that just didn't happen. But to go into the theme, people were hungry. Hungry for that. Again, this goes back theologically. I think people are starving and drowning in shallowness. And just to give them a little bit of depth to be able to go in, people are going to just latch on to that.
We'll piggyback to what Carlos was saying before. I think it can be challenging when the theme doesn't align up with what's going on, but I've found for myself, the most difficult times it's happened have been the most useful for the message. December, our month was joy, and December is what was happening in Ferguson. And so how do you can't put those together, but when you know you have to, your brain starts thinking differently. So what does anger mean in a season of joy? And people can wrestle with it. They have to go there now.
And Jude said it better than I was a little flippant. I should have said it with dead seriousness. It juxtaposes things I'm an atheist, but whether you're a theist or an atheist, right, we all believe in grace or serendipity, right? So juxtaposing these things together, something emerges, some otherness emerges to give us a gift that we just wouldn't have been able to do with our own brain otherwise. Because we use the meta theme of what does it mean to be a person of, which meant the meta-theme was Unitarian. What does Unitarian Universalism have to say about being a person of revelry? Revelry isn't just a cool idea. You have to make the argument that there's something in our theology that prioritizes revelry in the spiritual experience. Suddenly in my sermons and in my packets, I had to explain that. I had to explain, why does Unitarian Universalists lean towards this word and not another? Suddenly I'm writing theologically in a whole different way. I'm not writing this cutesy story about when I was a farm kid and I tie it to our theology differently. I have to make the case why this is special. That's theology, right? And that pushes us all to do that. And, again, not minimizing your point, but it would add on to what you were hungering, for other people to be those theologians as well. But this allows us to do it, too.